So I'm known in church circles as a late call. What that means is the priesthood was not my first career, but my second. My first career, believe it or not, was in insurance. I spent 30 years in the insurance business, and at one point in the early part of my career, I was an insurance salesperson. If you want to be a pariah at cocktail parties, be either a priest or sell insurance. I've had the experience of being both. Nobody wants to talk to you. But I was a salesperson working on commission, and I earned 10%. It was a very simple concept. Sales, sell, or don't eat. It was kind of an interesting and challenging way of life, and while I wasn't really good at it, we didn't necessarily starve either. But I did get to a certain point with it, and after a while I started to feel a bit undervalued. And so I went to the boss and asked for an increase in my commission, because I thought I was worth it. Now he was older and wiser, and he taught me a good lesson. Kid, he said, what you do is important, but you don't do it alone. The company provides a product, an office, a car, support staff, technology, training, service people, sales leads, etc. In short, everything you need to be successful. Looked at from that perspective, 10% is a pretty good deal, isn't it? It was, of course, right. But there is an even better one. Now, I preached on this gospel passage a few weeks back in August as part of another sermon about avoiding that dualistic sort of either-or thinking. And if you really, truly are motivated, it's on our YouTube site. You can go back and look at it again. But this morning, I want to go back instead to the gospel from a few weeks ago, the one about the vineyard owner. Let me refresh your memory. There was a landowner who planted a vineyard, put a fence around it, dug a wine press in it, built a watchtower, and then leased it to tenants and went off to another country. This vineyard owner did everything to make the vineyard successful, and then he hired others to care for it, and all he asked in return was for his share of the produce. And what did he ask for? He asked for 10%. Now, looked at from another perspective, he let the workers keep 90%. Yeah, you heard that right, 90%. While I'm busy complaining about my paltry 10% commission, the vineyard owner is paying his team 90%. Now, that's staggering, isn't it? But then again, God is indeed an amazing boss. For yes, God is the vineyard owner in this parable. And just as he does for them, so too does God do for us. He gives us everything that we need. Bodies, brains, education, opportunity, and everything else that we need to make our way in this world. For all that we are and all that we've accomplished is not really of our doing. Instead, it's a gift from God. And what does God ask in return for all this? Just 10%. The first fruits of our labor, or as we call it, a tithe. Yes, I said the T word in church. This is the point where most people start looking at their shoes. But we're going to keep on. The other 90% is ours to keep, to do with however we like. We can keep 90% of what we earn from our labors, and all God asks is for a 10% tithe. Let me tell you, that is a much better deal than my old job in sales. The workers in the story, well, they kind of had a good thing going, didn't they? God gave them everything they needed and let them keep 90%, but what did they do? They bought, and they wanted to keep it all. They had chosen to forget who owned the vineyard, who did all the preparation, who made it possible for them to grow the grapes. They chose to believe that they had done it all on their own and refused to give anything back. They even conspired to kill the owner's son so that they could keep everything. And that didn't work out too well for them, did it? No. As we learned in this story, that didn't work out really well for them. Let's look at things another way. By now, I hope you've all had a chance to see our stewardship video. This was a labor of love, and it was intended to let you hear from your fellow Epiphanites, from other people here in the congregation, about why they love and support this church. I think it turned out rather well, and I'm very grateful to the folks who were brave enough to share their stories. The vestry, well, they liked the finished product, but they also felt that we should have been stronger in asking people to pledge. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to ask you to pledge your financial support to this church, to Epiphany. Let nobody say you were not asked. You have been asked. Now we look at the world with different lenses, right? I know that there are people out there who are numbers people, so for those people, let me give you the numbers. We have about 100 pledges. And the average annual income in the geography right around the church is around $90,000 a year. That means that if everybody who pledged gave a tithe, we would have around $900,000 to fund the ministry of this church. For purposes of comparison, our budget this year calls for a good deal less than half of that. Okay, so you're probably sitting there saying, so what would we do with the additional money if everyone tithed? Well, let's look to our past to see how that might inform our future, shall we? Those of you who were here at the time when we moved from the office park to this large and beautiful campus, did it change our ability to be the church? I'm told that it did, in any number of ways. When you hired me as your priest and I became full-time at the parish, did it change our worship and our ministry options? I like to think that it did. We added new education and formation programs, new worship traditions, new discernment, music, outreach programs. Last year, when we added Father Chris, did that change our church? Oh, you bet it did. We've greatly expanded pastoral care, we've added new healing, new worship, and prayer programs. All of these things took an increase in stewardship, but the result has been amazing. And our blessings are abundant. Think about what we might do if we had more funding. How could our children and family ministry increase if we hired a youth minister whose sole focus was on that important group? We're doing a lot of online ministry these days. Perhaps you've noticed. That was a joke. Obviously you have. But how much more could we do if we had staff members who were completely devoted to that? We own a whole lot of vacant land next door. In fact, more than the church currently sits on. So what if we started to develop that land with new buildings and infrastructure for worship and for outreach? Possibilities, my friends, are endless. All it takes is money. Which brings us back to tithing. Give to God 10% and keep the other 90%. That's a great deal. But here's the best part. God doesn't really take any of your money. No, God is so good that He tells us to reinvest those tithes into ways to help us live into the Great Commission, to preach the gospel to all nations, to love God and to love our neighbor. The tithe, then, is an investment in God's kingdom. I'll tell you from personal experience, when you tithe to God, it changes you. Amen. It helps you align better with God and with the world. You stop dwelling so much on money. You become aware of how grateful you are for all the blessings in your life. You get out of the flow of the world's eternal chase for money, and you gain a new sense of peace. My brothers and sisters, these are not insignificant things. We do need to fund the mission and ministry of this church. But that's not why I'm talking about tithing. I'm going to let you know a little secret. Stewardship is not about the church's need to receive. It's about your need to give. I'll say that again because that's really important. Stewardship is not about the church's need to receive. It's about your need to give. So live into that need and give back to God in gratitude for all of your blessings. I promise you, you will indeed be changed by the experience. Amen.
Amen.